Round one's done and dusted, and a lot of rookies are on the radar right now. Welcome back. I'm Longy from The Casual Athlete, bringing you our rookie breakdown, looking at the guys who have played already and the guys who haven't played yet that you need to keep an eye on as potential cash cows for NRL fantasy. Now, quick round of intros first. Bergs, throw on to you.
Hey guys, I'm Bergs. I'm the tipping expert and matchup specialist here on The Casual Athlete, and we always come to you each and every week with different types of videos, so keep looking out for those. And joining us today, we have Foodie. Mate, how you going?
Mate, it is an absolute pleasure to be making my first appearance in the fantasy space of The Casual Athlete. Obviously done a bit with you. Rookie report, rookie watch, something I'm very passionate about. A thing that we're adding to the Chip and Chase podcast this year is our next series, Next Up, which is focusing on rookies sort of from a perspective of what the next NRL franchise should target. But a lot of these, having a footy eye, having a super coach fantasy eye, it'll translate well into here. So things that we're looking at, players that have caught our eyes, we want to bring them to you guys and we can talk about them from a fantasy perspective here.
Big time, man. And guys, keep it on Instagram too. I'm going to share a bunch of that Next Up content because I'm not a rookie expert, right? Like I get my eyes on a few of these guys, but once I see them in first grade, I feel like I get a read. Before that, though, I lean on guys like Bergs and Foodie. So behind the scenes, that's what's happening. Now, first player here, we're going to jump into the Raiders game because it's very interesting. We got Savelio Tamale. And from a first grade perspective, he was unstoppable in this game. Just couldn't be put down. Tons of offloads, tackle breaks, no tries, and still scored a 49 as a rookie winger. Dual position for fantasy. It is open and shut. He is an absolute machine. Foodie, I'm going to throw to you first. What are your thoughts on this guy?
Yeah, Matt, he's just an absolute gun. The Raiders worked really hard to get him from the Dragons. Dragons really didn't want to lose him. And you can see why. Like, this was only his second game of first grade and his first game for the Raiders. To do it over in Vegas, he had 16 runs, 219 meters from a rookie, 7 tackle breaks, 2 line breaks. He's just an absolute handful of a player. And for him to be pumping out those numbers so early into his NRL career, I think he's got a bit of like the early Jordan Rapanas in him. He's just such a handful. And, if we know what Jordan Rapana was like there at the Canberra Raiders. So I see him becoming a fan favorite, and his game just translates so well to Supercoach and fantasy terms as well. So I really like him.
Bergs, anything from you?
Yeah, mate, it was too hot tamale was the catchwords for the week for me. I absolutely love this kid, New South Wales under-19s winger as well. So definitely got some representative aspirations in him, but do not know how the Dragons let him go, considering the amount of elderly players, you might say, that they brought onto their roster this year. But yeah, should have kept this kid, definitely. He's been a big one to watch for a couple of years now and definitely showed it in Vegas.
Could have been a starter for round one for the Dragons as well, which is perplexing. But hey, we're not here to criticize St. George. We're here to talk about rookies. Now, a couple of other guys here too. I've got Paddy, Halasima, and Valmunga. Now, Owen Paddy, we're going to go quick fire because these guys aren't as fantasy relevant. We'll jump to the next game. I'm going to let one of you take each of these guys and we'll go back and forth. So who's got Owen?
Look, I'll take Owen for the moment. I just think it's very interesting that he managed to get that bench spot. I think it says a lot about what Ricky thinks of him, especially over some other guys that they may have on the roster there. I think if Starling goes down, it'll be very interesting to see who gets that starting Raiders job. And for him, I love the talent. I think it's there. But I just think he does need a couple of different things to go his way in order to lock down more minutes. But Starling was outstanding as well. So you can't really take that away from him. He's not going to eat into his minutes too much.
Starting to play some lock in that game too. So they were carving out minutes for him. Halasima, Foodie, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, Lika Halasima, he's one that I really like. He's part of that sort of new wave of Warriors crop of juniors that big raps on them coming through the grades. He's primarily a back rower, but he's had some sort of injury concerns coming along. But the stats that he's sort of been putting out in New South Wales Cup and before that in Flag and whatnot are unreal. Primarily an edge back rower, but since coming into grade, they're very happy to play him in the middle. So for me, he's just got a game that translates really well to the middle and just to fantasy Supercoach. He's a lot of runs. He just loves to offload, loves to tackle break. He's someone that if he gets, a few more minutes, if either the edge back rowers or middles of the Warriors go down and he finds himself in there, he will translate really well from a fantasy perspective. I really love him as a Warriors supporter, to be honest.
Yeah, to be Barnett or Fisher Harris going down, that would be sort of a requirement there for him to step in. And then Valmunga, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Which one of you wants to take him?
Yeah, look, you got to give it to the Warriors fan, mate. He talked about his boys.
Yeah, well, again, I'm not going to knock back our crop of juniors. He's another really talented player. From what I've seen, I prefer just the likes of Halasima, but people at the club and people who maybe even know more than me, and watch footy more than me, which is hard thing to do, especially when it comes to us.
Not possible. Not possible.
Yeah,
it's
almost impossible.
Every grade.
But no, they love Vaimunga. Previously, I can't even remember his first, Dimitri. He had a name change, so if people are confusing him with a player of last year, it is the same player. He did just change his surname this year. Also, primarily an edge, can play a bit of middle as well, similar to Halasima in the way that their game translates. But again, it's all just injury dependent. If a slot opens up and he finds himself there, yeah, lock and load.
Awkward price point as well, so probably one you have to slide past. Let's go to the next game here, and we're going to work through the games in order. We'll talk on this one briefly. So Jack Cole is not a complete rookie, but I think it's worth talking about him as a bit of a rookie because we saw him play next to Luai a bit last year. It's at the Cleary this year. I'm going to throw something out there and you guys can tell me what you think. I think that even without the kicking, so he doesn't really do any kicking, which is important for fantasy, he will have an opportunity to score well in fantasy against the Roosters next week. I might start him.
Look, I think Jack is definitely one of those guys who can play a role, but I'm not sure he's as dynamic as a guy, maybe a ball runner as Blaze Talangi, who's also sniffing around that position right now. To me, the strategy looked like from the Panthers in Vegas that it was just give the ball to Cleary and get them out of the way because Jack, I'm very surprised that he wasn't targeted more as well by the Sharks. I thought that was a bit of a misstep on their part. They maybe could have won that game had they gone that direction a bit more, especially with a guy like Nakora where he was defending. But I just think that Jack is really competing with Blaze at the moment and we don't really know who's the better defender right now. And I think that's who the Panthers will go with. But for Jack, I just don't really see him getting more than 30, 35 points a game.
Yeah, interesting shout. And Foodie, do you think he wins a spot over Blaze long term, or what are your thoughts here?
It's a bit of a hard one. I've always rated Jack Cole, and the Panthers were huge on him coming through the grades. Yeah. Now, he hasn't had the quickest and easiest transition into it, and then they go out and sign Blaze Talangi, who's earmarked as the future talent, and he is a talent. There's a lot of defensive issues in Talangi. I don't know if the idea was, it's a big game in the bright lights of Vegas. We're not going to rush Blaze in with these defensive issues and, coming to make his club debut for the 4-time premiers over there, and they just wanted to go with Cole. But in saying that, they won the game against a really good squad in the Sharks. What Cole played like, how he played, is exactly how they wanted him to play. If they're going to go down this route of Cleary, do everything, I think Jack Cole can be that perfect foil, and I think defensively he's very solid. So I'm not convinced he holds the spot, but if I was coaching in the Panthers, which shock horror I'm not, I would probably keep Cole in the squad, to be honest.
It's too bad. I thought we had Ivan Cleary on the show. Look, fair shout. I personally reckon he shows out in this Roosters game. I think things are going to open up, and we're going to go into that game now. 50-14, they lost. Can't win the comp this year. Let's see if Jack Cole can rub it in. Now, for this game here, Rob Toia is the first one I'm going to talk about, and I'll throw some reserve grade stats in, and probably throw to you here, Bergs. 6 tackle breaks a game, I believe it was, or maybe 7 tackle. It was something like that, and it was 150 plus meters run. Just an absolute machine in reserve grade. It translated well in this game. Is it just lock and load? Does he win the spot over Mark Nawani Tuase? Like, what's going to happen here with Rob Toia?
I think with Rob, he's been the guy that they've earmarked for this position for a number of years now, whether it be Suali'i or Manu being there. The only thing that's held him back has been a couple of ACL injuries. And that is something to be concerned about because of the risk of re-injury there. But if you saw him play the other night, you understand why they have kept him on the roster despite his injuries. Explosive is the big watchword you're going to have for Robert Toia. Everyone should have him in the side. He's cheap as chips, and he gives you that tackle breaking ability along with speed as well. For me, Robert Toia was easily going to be one of the watch rookies of the season, but he just confirmed it on the weekend, and hopefully he gets the spot over Mark. But Yeah, I'm worried about Billy Smith coming back is the only
I
thing.
mean, the other option there is, and no one would want to hear this at the Roosters, but maybe Noangani Tawase to the wing, Tupou potentially makes way. Like that, I would think about doing that personally, but again, I'm not the coach of the Roosters. Foodie, from what you've seen of him, do you think he can bring that level of intensity and explosiveness to the game each week?
I think 100% he can. As Bergs alluded to, coming through the grades, he was an absolute gun, and it's just been injuries that have sort of held him back. The way he sized up Ben Hunt, like one of the most experienced players in our game, decorated careers in the game, and just eyed him up, took him on with that step. He's a solid body, Rob Toia. There's a reason he's averaging those 6 or 7 tackle breaks, and I think he pulled out 5 tackle breaks in his NRL debut in a side that got blown off the park. Like, I think he will 100% hold on to that spot. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure Billy Smith was primarily a left centre as well. So maybe Nwanga Netawase gets shifted to the right, but it's pretty hard to. There is a big difference between playing left and right centre, especially if you're new to the game, as Nwanga Netawase is. So I see Robert Toia holding on to it, and yeah, he's a must-have in fantasy.
Well, there you go. All right, must-have. He's going to keep the spot. We released this a day before team list, so we'll get very quick verification on that one.
I'll hold my hands up.
Shivasaki's not a rookie. Jezewski's not a rookie. There's price like them. Sandon Smith, definitely not a rookie. We know about him. I'm going to throw a few names in here, and you guys tell me if we're worth talking about. But like Feketi, for example.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry.
No, it's all good. For Feketi, probably not going to get the amount of minutes that you probably want. I think Nat Butcher, once he comes back, will go straight back into that edge spot. The one I would like to speak about, though, is Blake Steep. Yeah. I think the opportunity here is for Blake Steep, and once again, another really cheap guy that you could have gone and got before round 1, which is what I actually did for my own fantasy team. But now that Radley has gone down, I expect Butcher to come in at that edge spot, and Steep is the under-19s New South Wales lock.
Yep.
Like, he has been, once again, like Robert Toia, kept on this Roosters roster for a number of years now. And needs to play his natural position, come in at lock. They haven't got Brandon Smith back at the moment as well. So you're going to have to assume that Connor Watson's going to stay at hooker. And Steep came in on the weekend, played a lot of minutes, more than he was probably expecting to.
Yep.
And he did well. And he made his tackles. They didn't have the ball as much, so you're not going to be able to see his ball play from that game if you go back and watch that game. But he can play a bit of a roaming lock, maybe second 5'8" role as well.
I will say I was on stage at a launch event with James Tedesco, and we asked him who's a rookie to look for at the Roosters. He mentioned Blake Steep specifically, massive work rate, a guy who he expects to grow into it this year. So, yeah, if there are injuries all year, then he could be one to look for. Is there anyone else for you, Foodie, here? So we mentioned Feketi before, Lasalu. There's a few guys here that are newer names to people that you want to talk about.
I don't think necessarily from a fantasy perspective, even if the Roosters have even more, terrible luck in the injury pool, I don't see too many of these players jumping in and getting a massive amount of minutes. I think players like Blake Steep for sure, maybe Feketi if there are a few more injuries. But no, there's not too many on the radar that I see doing massive wonders in the fantasy realm. A lot of good players in this Roosters side, but none that I'd sort of be looking at even, injury wise in fantasy terms.
Can I throw a question to you then? He's not on this list here, but Ben Takura. So he's one who's been in a lot of teams in preseason. He didn't get named. If he were to get a role, let's say I'm going to forecast through to the Origin period where we have no Carrigan, no Payne Haas, and I assume Pia Kura will be off on Origin duties as well, which is rough to think of. No Carrigan, no Haas, right? So a lot of minutes opened up. Let's say there are some injuries too, and Takura is coming in and he's being asked to do a bit. What can he handle? Like in reserve grade, was he playing big minutes or was he more in that, fooey, moi short stints role? I know he's a big boy, he's a young guy, but yeah, what do you think here, Foodie?
He was playing solid minutes, but yeah, it's more sort of, maybe 40 to 50 minutes a game. He's not going to be doing stints at a 30 minutes in a hit, especially not in first grade. I think the big thing with the Broncos too is they'll lose Payne Haas, they'll lose Pat Carrigan. They've got Corey Jensen, Xavier Willison as middles. They also have Martin Tapau, who I thought was their best player in the trials, and he'll come back in there. Takura, he will get more shots this year. I don't know what his minutes will necessarily look like, but he is an absolute talent. He works hard for a big fella, which is what you want, and he's a try-scoring threat at his size. So he's a player that he might not need the minutes to be really relevant. I'd definitely keep an eye on him, but yeah, there's no point starting with him, is there?
Yeah, I've got the eyes on him as a cash out through the origin period. So get him nice and cheap, bring him in. Xavier Wilson last year was a similar thing. Now we'll go to the Tigers and the Knights game. And Bergs, is anyone here who jumps out at you?
Not particularly for either team. Really, I was looking at it a little bit earlier. A bit of an ugly game, to tell you the truth, in general. But yeah, the only one I can really think of is Tristan Hope will probably go out of the side once Appy comes back, and then you're looking at Talon De Silva actually had a pretty good game in there. So there's a little bit of conjecture around to how many minutes Talon De Silva will get, but I expect it to drop when Appy comes back for sure.
Yeah, he'll quieten down. I'll throw a question to you then, Foodie. So Fair Tape, he's a guy who he came in last year, relatively average for fantasy. Like I can't sugarcoat it. He was pretty average.
Yeah.
There's a bit of hype about him as an explosive talent. And in the trial games when he's playing next to Galvin instead of Luai, I thought they played really nice direct attack together. And I was surprised they didn't stick with that combination for this game. Even, with the risk of him losing a spot to Stafford Toia, do you think he's someone who will grow into it in first grade, or do you think he's doomed to be a fantasy plotter?
No, he's got so much talent. So before last year, I believe he was Brisbane Tigers in the Queensland Cup. He's a little bit older than your general rookies. I think he's 23, 24. Like, he's definitely not old, but a little bit older. He was an absolute gun in the Queensland Cup. I thought he was going to be fantastic for the Tigers last year, but respectfully, it was hard to be fantastic in that team. I don't think many players besides your Lockie Galvins really stood out. In the trials, though, he showed a lot of what he was like in the Queensland Cup. He was unbelievable. I agree. I found it a bit odd that they didn't really stick with that sort of side on that right-hand side there where he had multiple attacking opportunities. The big problem with him, he's always been quite leaky in defence, even in Queensland Cup. And if they're going to pride themselves on that, I don't see him necessarily holding on to the spot. In saying that, Stafford Toia, despite has a lot more experience, but isn't the most, bright defender out there as well. I think Fatape, if he does get an extended shot and he gets close to what I know he can do, he can be an absolute fantasy gun. I really love him, to be honest.
Yeah, if I saw him next to Galvin, that would have been exciting to me because, like you said, in the trial games, they looked really good together. I'll jump to South Sydney and the Dolphins, and you guys are going to be jumping over each other to talk about this one. So I'm just going to let the first one jump in. Jamie Humphreys, I'm stepping back. What do you think?
Talk of the town, mate. I'm so hard for this guy right now. Honestly, it's more of a sense of what role is he going to play long term, because he has come in and been named at 7, and we saw that he can do it. But one thing for me is coming through the grades, he's always been more of a 6, I would say. But the talent is there, and showcase with the boot is unbelievable. The kick meters were outstanding.
730.
Yeah, ridiculous numbers kick meters wise, and he can kick goals as well. So this guy's extremely skillful, and the physical presence on him alone, I think, is something that we also need to take a look at, because for a 7, he's built like a back rower. It's a joke how big his arms are for a small bloke, and I just think that he has to be in this team somewhere, whether it's 7 long term and we just kick Dodd to the curb, or put him at 9 instead of Marmazelis, because to me, Marmazelis didn't exactly have the biggest impact on the game. And I think a guy like Humphreys, who had an outstanding work rate even at 7 and got into dummy half a number of times in this game, can definitely be the way moving forward for them. It just depends on where Wayne Bennett's head is at.
That's a toss-up, right? I did a breakdown on Instagram, actually, of this. So Bennett was asked in the press conference who he thought would win the spot. You saw him tap, line through. So I'm guessing he's going Humphreys. He's put the line through Dodd, but I can pivot that interpretation if I want to later and just be right out of the way. Foodie, anything you want to add here on Humphreys? Because he's had a bit of a strange path to first grade. I'm going to throw a question to you, actually. If he's such a good hooker, why was he behind so many hookers at Manly who desperately needed one last year? Like, this is the thing that's sort of perplexing me. Like, if he was a great 14, because he looks amazing to me, I'm wondering, what am I missing? Because he should have been in Manly's team last year if he's this good.
Mate, I often sit back and wonder what Manly were missing, because yes, they had him in their books and they really tried to manufacture him into a 9/14. He's always been an out-and-out half to me. He has the physical capabilities. I mean, he's built like a Greek god. He can play 9. He can get through the tough stuff. Over the weekend, he was targeted in defense. He came up with 30 tackles and didn't miss any at halfback. Like, he can get through that work. So sure, Manly can make him into a 9, but why did they need to, as you alluded to? They have some good players. They went out and signed Jake Simpkin, and then they brought in Jazz Tavanga and somehow made him a 9 again this year. I think Manly really just missed a trick. To me, he's in the halves, whether it's 5/8 or halfback. And if they really want to get Lewis Dodd back in there, which I wouldn't be rushing that, you've got a great young talent in Jamie Humphreys. You've got a first-round win. If it goes tits up, get rid of him. Sure, you can give Lewis Dodd a go. But for me, I'd be keeping him at halfback, and at worst, he becomes a 9 or a 14. You can't leave him out of the side.
I guess I just don't get this part, right? So at halfback, awesome. I haven't seen him play hooker. Like I genuinely have. Maybe you've watched him play hooker before, but actually, if you have, I want to hear about it because I'm looking at some going right. You know, Manly ran some very average hooker rotations last year. If he can play hooker, he would have been in their team last year. Like at some point, he would have made their team instead of just covering for Trey Evans.
Yeah, so that's my thing with this whole, Humphreys argument. It was one thing that they were going to move him from half because they didn't see a path forward for him in the halves to stay in the team long term. Whereas at 9, I think they were more concerned about whether Lachlan Croker's fitness long term was going to be right for them.
They didn't play him, is what I'm getting at.
No, they didn't. They didn't play him because they were in the middle of transitioning him, and then he signed with the Rabbitohs.
So what's changed between then and now? Because everyone's saying, "Oh, he might start at hooker." I don't think it's a possibility because if he wasn't ready then, what's changed between then and now? Like he's just played halfback in trial games and in first grade. Like he hasn't been playing hooker at South Sydney. So why would he suddenly be the starter of Mama Zealous? That's my big question here because I'm a Mama Zealous owner and I'm a potential Humphreys owner. I just don't think he's going to start a hooker.
I don't see a world he goes like if they bring back Lewis Dodd, I don't think they're moving Humphreys to hooker. He'll be a 14 or he'll be out of the side. If Mama Zealous stinks it up like for a long period of time and they need someone to come in, maybe. But I don't know what their other hooking options at the club are. I don't know if Jamie Humphreys is necessarily
is there.
Yeah, Havili, but again, I don't know if he's really who they're going to be needing. Yep. I don't see a world where he goes to 9 if they bring Dodd back. He'll be 14 or out of the side. Yep. I think he's a great cover at 14. He can spell Mamazelos for 20, 30 minutes if needed. But to me, his qualities lie in his versatility and mainly in the halves. So I think if you're a Pete Mamazelos owner, I'd be pretty safe with that pick, to be honest.
And then the other one I wanted to talk about here, which is really relevant, is because with Humphreys on the 14 spot, I thought, maybe he'll come on and be a dynamic, middle forward. Like maybe he'll play a bit of lock, like in Origin, how they get a guy like him and sort of come in. And then I saw Hubner play. I thought, no, this guy deserves a spot in the team. And so does Tallis Duncan. But Hubner in particular, he put a few shots on in this game. Like Wayne Bennett brought him across. If they're going to carve out minutes for a young guy at lock, it's going to be Lockie Hubner, isn't it?
Definitely. The one thing that would concern me with Lachlan Hubner is the ball playing aspect. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of it from him. Defensively outstanding, though. I think that's also something that the Rabbitohs lacked last year, a defensive identity. And he seemed to be the guy leading the line speed, leading from the front, which is weird to say from a guy who's played only a handful of first-grade games. Yeah. But Wayne Bennett clearly liked him, and that's why he brought him over from the Dolphins as well. A lot of these guys just follow Wayne around. But I think for Hubner, with Murray down now and their win round 1 and the gritty win that it was, we'll probably have a long-term spot here.
Yeah, because there's a bit of talk that Ewan Aitken comes back in round 3, round 4. Jairo moves to lock. Jairo moves to prop. There's all this stuff sort of floating around. Hubner, does he keep his spot over Tallis Duncan? Is Duncan a prop potentially? It's a bit murky. I'll throw you two, Foodie. Lockie Hubner, does he carve out a role and does he kind of block Humphreys from taking those spare lock minutes?
I think he potentially could. If this doesn't work out for Humphreys going to the bench and coming on as a lock, I think Hubner does block that. I think it says a lot that when Wayne Bennett came to this side, he poached 2 players, and the first of the players that he poached from the Dolphins was Lachlan Hubner, a player who'd played 4 first-grade games, I think, somewhere around that. He's just a workhorse. I think there is a question of, when Ewan Aitken comes back, I don't see Jai Arrow being moved to prop. I think it'll still stay with Hubner. Minutes may go down, even if he's starting on the bench, whatnot. I'd assume Jai Arrow to prop, but there's still a few mouths to feed. Toia, still coming back from injury, was on the bench. Does he get big minutes? But at the moment, you've just got to pick and stick. Like, he's in that role. He's playing well. The aggressiveness that he brought to the side, I think he'll become a fan favourite. So I don't see a world at the moment that he's going to lose a whole bunch of minutes. In fact, I think he could increase with how he performed in round 1.
He brings the heat. As a Hubner owner, I was very happy. 60 minutes is a lot of minutes, but maybe he can carve out more. Anyone else for you guys from this game that you want to talk through? Not really.
I think
rookies,
we covered this one.
Cool. All right, let's keep rolling through then. Let's go game by game here. So Dragons and the Dogs. Not heaps. I mean, there was one rookie who had a really bad injury. Who I was actually kind of excited about. But any rookies you want to talk about here? Stewart. What about Stewart? Foodie? Hamish Stewart?
Yeah, so actually he is a bit of an interesting one. I thought he looked really good on the over the weekend, and the poor Dragons, I think both Couchmans, definitely one of them went down with, I think it was a hyperextended knee. So there are going to be minutes to open up. And with how Hamish sort of debuted and how they've always liked him coming through the grades, he's listed as a middle here. He played middle. He came through the grades as an edge. So again, there's versatility. If there's injuries and you've got him on there, he can come in and fill that. I really like him. And I think the fact that he got this debut in round 1 from Shane Flanagan, who's notoriously pretty passionate is not the word, but he's pretty loyal coach. If these young fellas are coming through and impressing, they're going to stay in the squad. And with the way he performed, I think he has a role on this side, especially moving forward with a few of their injuries. The only concern could be with the rumoured David Clemmer coming to the club.
So there's Clemmer. I'll throw a few guys here too. Tom Eisenhuth to return to the squad. He ate up a lot of minutes last year. And then we throw in Hame Sele potentially as well. I like Sele.
I think also Jack de Belin spent a bit of time off the field with HIA as well in this game. So I think it's a bit weird to read into the amount of potential minutes that he could get. So I think he's a fair way back on the totem pole at this point in time. But I did love what I saw from him.
So would you say when we get those guys back, I think he's struggling to keep a spot in the 17?
Yeah, reserve grade.
Yeah, maybe on the edge of the bench, but I mean, his PPM was good, right? So 42 points in 43 minutes, 38 tackles. Yeah. Plenty of run meters or a forced error.
There's also a guy who didn't get in there, who I expect to kind of be in there. And I think Foodie might agree with this one with Loco Pacifici Tonga. Can really be that kind of Payne Haas type prop.
Okay. Yeah.
From my perspective, I don't know about you, Foodie, but he has the skill, the speed, the offload ability. He's 120 kilos, 195 centimeters tall.
Wow.
Like, he's a unit. And I'm just starting to wonder, like, why he's not getting into this side at the moment, because they could really use some extra punch out of their middle forwards. Like, it's pretty bland right now. And I just think maybe there's a bit of a defensive aspect to his game that Shane Flanagan doesn't like. But I'd be putting him in there, trying to blood him as much as possible, especially with the experience in this team right now. I think it could really help him.
Yeah, I mean, they've gone Couchman. They're like, a
mobile.
lot of defensive.
They've gone really mobile.
Like, it's a bit of a smaller pack. Foodie, your thoughts on him?
Yeah, mate, he is an absolute unit of a player. I covered a fair bit of him last year through the juniors and the podcast that we did on them, a few of the grand finals and whatnot. He's such a talent, and I thought he was ahead of Hamish Stewart in the pecking order. It did surprise me that Hamish Stewart jumped him, but Hamish has sort of been in the grades a little bit longer. For me, I agree with Bergs. I agree with you guys. I'd be having him out there 20 minutes if as just in general NRL. If you can get 20 minutes out of a unit like him, he's an athlete. He's very much in the Payne Haas mold. Maybe not as fit. Probably can't punch out the 65 minutes that a Payne Haas can do, but he's still so young. I'd be blooding him very early and getting him minutes in there because, Loco Pacifici Tonga, absolute gun of a player.
It sounds like he won't be ready for my fantasy side. That's kind of like reading between the lines. That's kind of what I'm hearing from you guys.
Yeah.
So even if he gets named on the bench, 20 minutes, 25 fantasy points, like a great PPM, bit of a trap potentially because he won't get the 40-minute role. My issue with them too is they've got guys like we saw. I'll jump up to him, but Toby Couchman played 70 minutes in this game. You know, Emre Gula played 50+ minutes. Like they've got guys who can soak up more minutes. So my concern with cash cows at St. George is that there'll never be enough injuries that the minutes sort of pop up. And
you never know. Some of those guys are getting a bit older.
Couchman.
But I mean, guys like Jack DeBellin did spend time off the field as well. Clemmer's pretty old. Like if he comes, like I wouldn't be. I don't know why they signed him.
Why would you sign Clemmer?
I don't like the Clemmer signing. Another injury that they had though was Raymond Faitala-Mariner went with the HIA as well. So there were minutes to go up, which is probably why Toby Couchman chewed up a few more. But he is young, he's mobile. He probably can do that anyway at a high click.
All right, let's keep rolling through these games then, because we've got the Seagulls and the Cowboys. And man, the Cowboys got destroyed. All right, so this game here, I mean, any rookies you guys want to shout out? Braden Burns, not a rookie, but I'll tell you what, he announced himself a bit in the back end of this game. But we're not going to go into him. I just like Braden Burns. Jumping down the list, I mean, Duffy, right? We got to talk about him. And personally, I was impressed. I thought he held his own. It was not a good game for the Cowboys, but he never sort of put his head down, made a few mistakes here and there, but kept it going for fantasy.
Yeah, the one thing that I will say about this Cowboys game is it cannot be pinned on this bloke. Yes, he's a rookie, and yes, it was his first game. It was trial by fire. Like Manly, for all intensive purposes, are one of the best attacking teams in the competition, and they out and out showed that the other night. That everything was clicking really well for 60 minutes. They just pounded us into the core of the earth, and I was struggling to come up with adjectives to describe how I was feeling at the time. But yeah, for Duffy, still solid in kicking, probably won't get as much pressure from other teams. I think Manly are a top 4 team as well. They pressured him like no tomorrow. And I think that he will have easier days as halfback, and to get 39 in this kind of performance where the Cowboys weren't even in it in the game. I think at the 40, maybe 30-minute mark, we had 20% of the ball, which is a joke. And I think in the second half, he definitely showed his quality a bit more, and that'll come with time as well.
One of the things that does make him interesting for fantasy is the halves partner he has. So Tom Dearden is there. Dearden's a pure 6. Like he is. He runs the ball, he tackles hard, he creates attack, but he's not sort of steering the team around. He's not kicking the ball, all that. So Duffy has that whole set of responsibility, which is great for fantasy. But a lot of pressure comes with that. And like you said, they put pressure on because they knew he was kicking the ball because he's the guy who can do it. Maybe Drinkwater can take a bit of that.
It'd be Drinkwater taking the pressure off.
But it was mainly Duffy. So, I mean, Foodie, from you, has Duffy sort of played that role in reserve grade where he has been that steering 7 and dominated a team with a running 6? Or has he had more 50-50 roles?
Nah, he has predominantly been the out-and-out 7 that you expect. He himself can run. He's got really good vision for his age. Like he'll, if he can spot a gap, he will take it on. Nothing presented itself to him in this game, which is, fair enough. But from all I heard, that Todd Payton gave him the instructions of going out into this game was to tackle well, defend well, and get your kicks. And he did that. He made 25 tackles with like 1 miss for a rookie on debut in a team that just got absolutely ran through. He kicked for over 400 meters. If he gets dropped after this, I think it's absurd, and I don't want to hear a Jake Clifford being, he was always coming back in. Clifford was part of the reserves. Clifford was healthy. They chose Duffy. If they're going to drop the rookie after this, I think that's absurd. I also think it's really hard to get any momentum going when your pack is just absolutely demolished the way it was. I think Manly ran over the top of them. A Tamale back on this side could help that, but there's hopefully not going to be games where the pack gets on the back foot this much so badly, and I believe he'll keep the spot. I believe there's a lot more in Duffy than we've seen so far.
Yeah, I'm just annoyed that he wasn't kicking goals as well, because last year
he kicked the first and then didn't kick the others.
Yeah, because last year in Queensland Cup he kicked goals at a pretty high clip as well. So
he's a better kicker than Drinkwater.
100%.
Maybe it was because of the game they were having, and they just thought, you know what? We'll make sure he doesn't get yelled at by the fans one-on-one for a minute straight, multiple times in this game. You know what I mean? Like just protecting him a bit. I don't mind that from Payton. Rolling down the list here too, there's a guy who got cooked a bit. So Jaxon Purdue, and a lot of hype on Purdue. I've liked what I've seen from him personally. My advice on him was do not start him in your fantasy side. He's up against Olakau'atu and Ruben Garrick. That is a terrifying prospect, especially for an undersized center who probably isn't really a center. Bergs, Cowboys fan? So start with the positive, because obviously, we saw he got a bit exposed in defense by a very good edge pairing. So I'm not even criticizing him, but what do you like about him?
I love his foot speed and his agility. I think he's extremely elusive, but that doesn't necessarily translate to center. I think making defensive decisions is extremely tough, and it's heavily scrutinized at the center position. And I think putting him next to a guy like Nene, who is playing his 5th year of NRL now, who still can't make defensive decisions as well, isn't going to help him at all. And I think that maybe Todd Payton needs to rethink that, because they swapped Nene sides as well. They put him on the left.
I was going to say, I thought he was with Bacon in the trial.
He's a right edge back rower as well. So I'm super perplexed as to why they decided to run with that pairing. But I think for Purdue, he, again, will have easier nights. There's not a number of gun right centers in the competition. And he's filling the shoes of Val Holmes, who, for all intents and purposes, has been our star player or almost best player for the last couple of years, or best outside back at least. And I think it'll take Purdue a lot of time, because he's generally a half or a fullback.
And Foodie, for you, mate, because I know you played with a super coach as well, but for Purdue, the way I see it, maybe a sunny day against an easier matchup, there could be days where he absolutely tears off some big games. Is that how you're viewing him too? Very, very fixture dependent. You could start him at a pinch, but probably not a guy you start him most weeks.
Yeah, 100%, especially in Supercoach, which is a bit more attack-oriented. That's where Purdue's going to have his best performances. I mean, that's where the Cowboys have their best performances, so he'll just be the beneficiary of that. He moves so well, as Berg said. Center's not his best position. He's played it. He's predominantly a half, like 5'8" halfback. For me, he's a 5'8" or a fullback. He played a bit of fullback as well. And the way he moves, he's just better suited for them. I think it was a lot to ask, as Berg said, putting him up as a rookie on debut against Olakau'atu on that side in the position that's probably the hardest on the field to defend in. I think he tried hard. If they drop him after that, I'll be quite disappointed in the Cowboys as well, because I think he's got so much in him. But at the same time, maybe a few more reps in reserve grade could be the best. If you really want to make him a center, put him back there, let him learn his trade. But yeah, if you want to play him in Supercoach or Fantasy, you're looking on dry tracks and you're looking for an easier matchup for the Cowboys where he can score a few points, because he will do that.
Yeah, because the Cowboys will have days. They'll have days where they rock up and it's hot and they're playing North and they're up against a team. Maybe Parramatta takes them to Darwin or something ridiculous like that wouldn't happen. Para do that every time.
Night game, round 1 against a fit Manly with Turbo. It's not an ideal matchup for me. I'm not exactly concerned about them for that.
So. Laybard is around. That's one thing to keep in mind.
100%.
Any other rookies from this game, or even players who haven't made the team, that we should keep an eye out for?
Not necessarily that I can think of for the Cowboys. I think these were the main players that you're hearing of that would make them.
Who's the next hooker at the Cowboys? Because Robson's going. If they lose a bunch of games like this, at some point they're going to be thinking, all right, who's our next hooker? Let's get him in.
Yeah, look.
And it's not Jacob Little, because he's coming to Parramatta.
To me, it's not Carl Lawton either. Big question for us to answer, I think, over this year especially, whether we look to steal or try to make...
Who have you got?
I haven't got answers for you.
They do. Young fella, his name escapes me, but he's like 18. So I don't see him getting a debut this year unless it's a train wreck for the Cowboys and they need to blood these young guns and prepare for the future. I can't remember his name. I'll see if I can find it, but
I might not Granville in a wig.
Yeah, bring him back. Honestly, just bring back Granville would be your best bet. I don't see them blooding the young fella. He's a bit of a talent, but yeah, I don't think they have an answer to who replaces Robson at the moment.
No one really fantasy relevant then. Okay, cool. That was a question that's kind of been sitting in my head a bit. I thought I'd ask. Now, Storm v Para is the last one here, and then we'll sort of talk more generally. But for Storm v Para, I'm going to jump right down to the bottom of this list and talk about a guy I was pretty impressed with and get your thoughts. Toia, is that how you pronounce it? So he came in for Ryan Madison at the last second. That man is enormous. And he looked good, moved well. I don't know if he's got it, right? 14 points in 19 minutes. It's a very small sample size. And I was watching through tears. So it was tough at that point. But he was absolutely fantastic. Like, is he a beast? Like, is it that simple? He's big, he's fast, he knows what he's doing.
No,
Damn it.
I'm just.
I really want to believe.
I don't think my thing is that he's not going to be there long term. I think they have a lot of injuries right now. Matto, as you said, pulled out. He wouldn't have played this game otherwise. The PPM's there though, which is something very interesting to note. I think he wanted to put his best foot forward in what was pretty dismal outing for the Eels. And I think when he actually was on the field for a lot of that time, I guess Storm attack dried up a fair bit, and
you talking about his plus minus.
He did bend them back a little bit in terms of his runs and getting involved in some gang tackling. But yeah, I don't really see how he carves out more of a larger role unless he's beating out. Well, he's clearly beating out guys like Wiremu Greg, but he's behind guys like Dury and Jack Williams. I expect to probably not be there in the second row moving forward. Lane is also going to come back, whether they play him at edge or middle.
Yep.
Who knows? But to Vaiti, liked what I saw from him today.
Yeah, see, I thought he looked good. Like, I mean, I think Parramatta are lacking that big prop that brings a bit of impact. We thought Wiremu Greg might be that guy. He hasn't really been that so far. Yeah. Foodie, from you, does this guy have what it takes? Like, what's his role in reserve grade? Like, what have you seen from him?
I'll be honest, mate. He's actually a player that I haven't seen too much of, but in this game, I really liked what I saw in terms of relevance. Yeah, maybe he's not inside, but also the Eels were abysmal. Maybe they just flog every old head off and go, okay, we're going full in, all in the future, and a player like him can get minutes. It's a bit of an outside chance. Don't see that happening. But with what I saw of him in the game and the little I've seen, he's got talent. It's all there. He's sort of been hit or miss in the again, I preface, very few games I've seen in the lower grades where he relies on his talent. He's not so much of a massive hard worker. But again, in this game, that sort of swayed my opinion of him. So I don't know what role he has in the Eels moving forward, but I did like what I saw.
See, I'd love Parra to use the last bench spot for a guy like this, right? So we've historically run guys like Makatoa who, I like Makatoa, but the guy was like 30 years old playing 2 minutes off the bench. Like, why are we wasting that experience slot? Get a guy like this in who can come on, bring a bit of impact, and if we have injuries, step into small minutes, get some experience at first grade. Like, that's how I see it. So I think he could be that guy. Another guy, Riley Smith. Look, it's weird for me to be impressed by multiple players from Parramatta after today's performance, but I kind of liked Riley Smith. I thought he came on. I thought he opened up a few holes with a bit of craftiness. I thought there were a couple of times where he opened up big holes and he looked back and the Parra team was standing 10 meters behind him with their hands on their hips doing sweet F all. But I think when they play against an easier team, we'll see some attacking stats from him. Fantasy stats weren't good, but 52 minutes was encouraging. Have you guys seen much of him in reserve grade?
Yeah, definitely just spent a lot of time on the field compared to Brendan Hands, who we've been led to believe is the number one hooker there. There was talk about him getting a bigger role, which I didn't really buy into, but this game said a lot, to tell you the truth. And you love the effort that you saw out there. But I think, Foodie, for you at Wenty, is this guy been more of a threat than we've been led to believe?
Well, I hadn't thought so. Like, I've always sort of liked what I've seen of him. He's a handy player. He loves a running game, and I think that might be what the Eels need. Maybe they just need that service. In saying that, his service is really good. What's telling for me is that he was on a development he was on below a development contract, I believe, to start this season. And after his trial performances, where he was an absolute gun, they've upgraded him to get him eligible to play first grade in round one, put him straight into the team, and then had him play the big minutes. I think all of a sudden he's come from the clouds to be the player that they believe will lead them in the future. And I think he has that ability. He played Australian schoolboys for cricket and rugby league in the same year, I believe it was. Like, he's just a talented athlete. He's a goer. So I really like him for an NRL perspective, but yeah, it doesn't read well fantasy terms, does it?
I mean, the score's abysmal, but I sometimes think you have to ignore the score, right? And you got to think, you know what? If Parramatta have given this guy 53 minutes in the first game of the year, that's a tough game, right? Maybe that grows as we go along. You know, Parramatta seem to like an 80-minute hooker. Maybe he grows into that. If you need a cash out, I don't think he's the craziest option. Like, he's not in my team right now, but if in a few weeks' time I need a cash out and he looks the goods, he passes the eye test, some of the scores are getting a bit higher, I reckon I'd probably just ignore a bit of the fantasy production and go, you know what? I think this guy carves out minutes. Like that's one that I'd keep an eye on. But look, let's keep an eye on team lists as well. Charlie Geimer, he's not a complete rookie, but he's rookie enough. Now, we've all seen him play first grade, but I want some reserve grade insights here from either of you.
I'll start us off then. In reserve grade, primarily an edge. From what I've heard recently, they've been trying to get him to be, or at least last year when they had Brad Arthur at the helm, they were trying to turn him into a lock, and I think he was fantastic there, and I'd like to see him there. But that's a path blocked by Hopgood. So with their edge worries, I think they go back to that. He has just always been like he's a representative player in the lower grades on an edge. He's a captain in the lower grades on an edge. He's just a weapon of a player. And I think he's someone that's going to be very important to their side this year. So fantasy-wise, Supercoach-wise, general footy-wise, he'll excel if he just gets given the bigger minutes. He goes and goes about his footy. He's a battler, but he's got a bit to him. So I love Charlie Geimer, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, Kelmer got hooked twice in this game as well. So got hooked 12 minutes in, got back on due to injury, and got pulled off again. He was probably forecast for 80 minutes, right? And we saw Charlie Geimer, I think it's 69 minutes in this game. 25 points. Again, it's not great fantasy production, but you got to look past that, right? Yep. Bergs, do you think he carves out a role? Like I just find it hard because I almost view him, if he was of the most used to the Eels team, he'd be a bench prop, right? And he's not a bench prop.
No, but at the lower grades, and especially under 19s New South Wales, he did play prop.
Okay.
So he can do it, but it is a size thing, I would say, and a week-to-week prop thing for him because he doesn't do it week to week. I struggle to think that what we need to do is maybe para fans like yourself need to let go of the past a little bit and maybe let go of guys like Madison and Lane and I think Foodie talked about this a little bit as well. Maybe just think, all right, we're in a new era right now. Let's go with some new fresh face players like Tuivasa, like Geimer, Ryley Smith. I think Iongi is another one as well that we'll probably talk about in just a sec, and give them a go because it can either be one or the other, or you can limp your way through this season and maybe finish 10th without Moses. Like if Moses is there, could be a bit different, and especially if Geimer is going to be playing on that right edge where they had Kelmer a lot of the day today, especially he started there. I mean, he did get hooked after 13 minutes, but he started there. Can he develop a working relationship with Moses is my question.
Or are you thinking Kautonga, for example? Like he was originally meant to be the starter at Parramatta, got injured. He played a bit of Fiji. Again, open to both of you guys. Is he the guy who could be the solution for Parramatta on the edge back row spot, Foodie?
Solution, I'm not sure, but he's a really good player. He's a very good attacking player. Now, I don't know if the Eels need that after their performance against the Storm. I don't know if having Kautonga out there was going to be that much of a difference, but we saw in the trials, especially last year for the Bulldogs, he's a very good talent, and was earmarked to be their left second rower. I thought it might have been the right. I can't remember. It was earmarked to get one of the starting spots. I assume he hasn't slid that far down the pecking order with the injury. I think due back in round 4. If it's been a tough few games for the Eels by then, he could come straight into this side. Could be relevant, but again, someone like Charlie. But yeah, Charlie Geimer, I think he's the future no matter what role he's in. Like Berg said, he played prop. They originally signed him as a center, so he's just got talent. He just goes about his work. Second row lock prop. Yep. I think Geimer's got a big role for their side.
Yeah, a bit of Liam Martin about him.
Doesn't look like 100% at all when he plays though. Like I look at him and
not
think,
at all.
Beef up and play prop, mate.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
Definitely. I'm in your camp as well.
But
I think that would be really good for him as well, to be honest.
And then I'll throw before we go to Iongi, Valepu, right? So he's looked good when I've seen him. They got a couple of these monster blokes at Melbourne in the reserves. There's a few other guys that have popped up too that have played a couple of games. And I just think, that's a unit. But this guy here, look, 28 points. I think it was 31 minutes. Is there anything in this?
No. I think from the perspective of that Nelson's going to come back. Utoka Manu is there now.
Yeah. But is he a guy who will earn minutes over a longer period of time?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I'm thinking maybe 2 years down the track, he's probably carved out a nice role from himself. Today he got a big opportunity because Parra were well out of that game, and the Storm were able to trial a few different things. They took off Hughes, they took off Eli Katoa, and they took off Grant later in the game. So it allows you to play these guys and get them more experience at NRL level than they probably wouldn't normally get in a close game. I don't expect Lazarus to have more than 20, 25 minutes in games moving forward, but with some injuries, could get in there a little bit more.
Foodie, is he a beast?
He's an absolute weapon. He's been in their development system for a couple of years now. I remember when he sort of came into their system, and he's been killing it in the lower grades. But a thing to note is he's not like 19, 20. He's born in 1999, so he'll be 26 this year.
So old.
Yeah.
So old.
26 in March. Yeah.
How
But
old are you,
with, he's got me covered actually. I'm big 25 in November. But I'm sitting here behind the screen not playing footy, so my chances are gone. But if his future is 2 years down the track, we're looking at someone who's 28. And 28 is probably actually the prime of your athletic abilities. But a lot of people, when it comes to footy, it's like, okay, you're technically towards the back end. Let's look at the next wave of generation of players. So I think he has to do big things this year to prove he's an NRL player, to prove he has a spot on the side, which could mean great things for Supercoach fantasy prospects. And we know Nelson's, no stranger to a suspension, and Lazarus can get in with one Nelson suspension and one injury to someone else or origin around that time. He can play some big minutes, and in those big minutes, he can thrive. He can definitely earn his place on the bench and in fantasy sides.
My one worry there is they've got guys who can sponge up minutes, basically. So Josh King, you got a few guys, Liero, these guys can eat up minutes if they need to, and it just means that again you don't get a lot of value out of these cash.
Like I said, I think Welch leaving helps him too.
And then Tokamanu comes in. I'll throw to you, Foodie, with Iongi, because obviously you've watched a bit of him in reserve grade. What do you think of him?
Yeah, he's a gun. I know a lot of people were sort of a bit confused on the sort of player he is coming into this. He is a workhorse of the, maybe not Dylan Edwards mold, but he will have 20 runs a game when the Eels have more than 3% possession in a game. He will run and he will tackle break and he will line break. But on top of that, he has really good hands for his, for his age and a player of his sorts with little experience in the NRL. I think in terms of fantasy and Supercoach, I'd still be looking at him, especially at his price point. He's a little bit more expensive in fantasy than I thought he might have been, but he does have a lot of talent. 30 points in a game that, they had 56 or whatever it was put on them, I think is pretty exciting. I think that's not bad. He has a lot to him. The Eels worked so hard to get him. They moved on their captain and, one of the Eels greats in Clint Gutherson just to have this guy in that position. I think it says a lot about him, and I'm excited for the future with him. He's definitely someone just to keep an eye on. He can be an absolute star of our game in a couple of years' time, to be honest.
I think my only question with Iongi, and I love what I saw from him today, is he's 23, right? If he was so good coming through the grades, why was he behind guys like Dane Laurie? Why did it maybe take him 3-4 years of reserve grade, which he did play, to get to this point? And if he was a genuine out-and-out talent, why did not another club poach him before Parramatta? Would be the only thing I would say. So I think, yes, he's typically not your flashy fullback. He's not going to do the turbo stuff. He's not going to do the Tedesco stuff. But I think he can definitely be a solid piece, kind of like Gutherson, in the sense that he added to the attacking weapons that they already have. He wasn't a major one.
Yep. I like him. I think he's not Reece Walsh, right? But he looked very solid in this game today, and he's looked solid in the trial games as well. He looks hard to tackle, right? And as a fullback, if you can catch high balls and you can be hard to tackle and you can have a work rate and rock up in defense, then you're doing your job. Is he going to be, like you said, is he going to be a top 5 fullback in the game? That might be his ceiling, at the edge of the top 5. But I think for fantasy, he's a guy you stick with. Like 30 points, he had the try, right? So it's not a real 30 points, but against the Tigers next week, I'll be starting him 100%.
Yeah.
Like, the Tigers can miss a tackle, and Kalen Ponga marched out 62 points. He's not Kalen Ponga.
Yeah.
But 62 points without any tries or try assists. I think he had a couple of line breaks. But
Yeah, he's also a guy who's going to get pushed all year as well from
Mm.
another young Australian schoolboys player in Josh Papali'i.
We'll talk
who
about
they
him,
also
man. Like, what do you
signed.
think of him?
Outstanding young player.
Yeah.
He is one of those guys who could be more flashy, more of a Reece Walsh type fullback, but doesn't exactly have the size and the experience quite yet at maybe the lower levels of the game. 19 years old, so
Okay.
super raw, but the talent is there for me, and it doesn't show up on the stat sheet when you go and look at reserve grade games that he has played, but he is going to push Iongi all year and possibly into the next couple of years for this number 1 jersey.
Would you say, if I'm throwing it to you, 3 years from now, who's the starting fullback at Parramatta? Both of them, no contract issues, none of that. Like, they're both there. Who's starting?
Oh, it's tough for me because Para make a lot of really stupid decisions.
You're the coach.
Sometimes I'm the coach. I would probably go with Josh Papali'i purely because of the talent that I've seen coming at an earlier age. And it's more well established. I think it took Iongi a little bit more time to develop in what is a very good Penrith system, whereas Josh came from the Dogs system. So he's almost had to establish a bit more of a name for himself and a bit more reputation that way, rather than just being a Penrith off-hanger.
Okay, and Foodie, same question to you. 3 years from now,
Yeah.
who's the starter at Parramatta?
I'm going to lean towards Iongi just from how much faith they have in him this year and how they moved heaven and earth to sort of get him to the club. There's someone they're really excited about. In saying that, Josh Papali'i is phenomenal. He's someone, again, I watched in the grand finals of last year in the under-19s, did the podcast on him. He's an absolute star. There's every chance they're both in the squad, but if they're both in the squad, it will be Papali'i at fullback. He is an out-and-out superstar in the lower grades, and he's fullback through and through. Iongi, I could see making meters from the wing if they want to do that. I could see him at centre. I could see him at 5'8" if they wanted to press that and have a big body. If Dill Brown leaves, maybe that's the path to get Papali'i in the side. But based on just my gut feel and everything I'm hearing about through Parramatta, Iongi is their long-term fullback. But, Papali'i snipping at his heels is tough.
Yeah. He's come from Penrith. He runs a bit like Michael Gordon for me. I loved Michael Gordon back. Like, he was my favorite player for a period of time. But just that low to the ground, like hard to tackle.
Teddy runs a bit like that.
Yeah, and Iongi has a bit of a turn of pace that you underestimate. Very interesting though. You guys are different on this one, so we'll come back to this in 3 years if we remember. Which I'll probably remember actually. If there's a change of fullback, I'll remember this conversation. But it's worth noting though, if Iongi has some struggles. Josh probably is there. And in reserve, in the trial games, Josh got plenty of time in those games. They wanted to see what they had in him, and he showed out in those games too. So, yeah. All right, well, that's rookie watch. Any last players from you guys before we go through?
Just trying to look down my list here to tell you the truth. Have you got anything straight up there, Foodie?
I don't. I think that a lot of the players that we're seeing now that are on the verge, they're in extended squads or they're making debuts, or we saw them in the trials. I think someone like Jack Todd, the Bulldogs, is someone I'm very, very excited about as a player.
Trial.
He is an absolute gun, and what he showed is maybe the upper end of the spectrum. Like, I don't expect the try line breaks every time, but he has that ability. He's a great ball player, hard work. Has a great game for this sort of stuff.
Like, if he was coming to this dog side, let's say they had to move someone out, what role would he take?
He's lock forward or prop, and he's got the size about him that I think he could make an impact. What did concern me was Saluka Fafita did get that straight into that side, and Todd, I don't think even made their extended squad, but he's coming into about 21 this year. He's been in their junior system since he was about 16. They've got a lot of love for him. He's someone I really can't wait. And if, the size of the Dogs pack does get to him this year and they need someone like him, I think he'll explode onto the scene. So I can't wait to see him this year. He's my big one.
I'm surprised they haven't run him already because
to be honest,
run an undersized pack.
Yeah.
They started Salmon at lock this week, which I don't love personally. I'm a big Kurt Mann fan. I think the leg speed he brings, and just a bit of creativity. Not a great kicker of the ball, as he showed in that game, right out in the full, but he brings a bit, and then you probably do have to compensate for that with a bit of size. Saluka Fafita, he's done it before, I guess, but yeah, okay. So Jack Todd, because that's one where I posted a top 5 scorers of the preseason post, and Jack Todd was there, and I was looking at it like, I don't know Jack Todd. Like I watched a bit of him in that trial game, but I don't know who this guy is. I was getting a lot of DMs like, who is this guy? I'm like, don't worry about it yet. We'll look at it when he gets named, but that's a good one to come away with. Keep an eye out on Jack Todd. And you look like you want to say someone, Bergs?
Well, I think for me, the other one I would look at is maybe Cody Hopwood as well from the Knights. Lock or middle forward. I think with them having lost Daniel Fafita and Leo Thompson is moving on, you might look if they struggle to blood a guy like Hopwood. He is a prop, did play under 19s as well, but I think he moved, didn't he, Foodie? No, he's still there.
Hopwood,
Miles
Martin moved.
Is the other guy as well who could possibly, and then again, the Knights have this great junior system, and a lot of these players tend to go somewhere else. But I think that they're back to Hopwood. There could be an opportunity there for him if the Frizzell lock thing doesn't work out. If the Knights start losing games and think, well, Leo's moving on, let's get Hopwood in here. He could be our long-term prop for the future as well.
A change of guard because you said Dan Safidi, he left. Adam Elliott is somewhere, and you've got Leo Thompson leaving as well. So yeah, that could be interesting.
And Robert Derby.
Derby at the Cowboys, winger. Yeah, okay. All right, keep an eye out for Derby too. He's not going to get the spot unless Braden Byrne gets hurt. But yeah, okay. That's been our rookie video, guys. Bit of detail. I'll pop in the description some sort of time cards as well. So if you do want to go back and look at certain players, I'll have those in there too. Foodie, Bergs, thanks for jumping on. Thanks for giving all your insights, and good luck with your fantasy and Supercoach teams.